This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hey, it's Baxter Colburn here from Public House Media. Did you know that we just added a store here at Public House Media? No, I'm not talking about a grocery store where you can go buy apples or bananas or peanut butter, which are all fantastic, especially when peanut butter's on all of those. Anyway, we've added a store here at Public House Media so you can not only come and represent your favorite podcast network, but also represent your favorite shows as well, too. Just go over to thepHmedia.com and look in the top right corner where you'll see the button that says Store. Click on that and you can search through all of our great products. Or if you go to our Facebook page, Public House Media, you can see on the left-hand side a tab that says Store. All of our products are listed there as well too. It's the new Public House Media Store. You don't want to miss it. It is fantastic. Buy some of that great swag to support your favorite shows and to support Public House Media. Check it out today.
This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Completely Serious, where we talk about sports and have fun with great guests. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Completely Serious. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Bobby Wolpoff has saved the USA's life in this World Cup.
Hall, the runner, loose ball, it's good! Gonzaga, the slipper still fits. To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag, it gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it.
He's in. Patriots win the Super Bowl. Brady has his fifth.
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness!
I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Good morning, sports fans. It's another edition of the Cheap Seats here on the Public House Media Network. Jeffrey Chiles, Max Wolpoff, your sports information enthusiast this morning. And we start this morning, Max, with a look at Major League Baseball, or should we say not a look at it. I don't know about you, but even sitting here in my office, I feel like I'm freezing, and I'm not even outside, so I don't know how fans and players feel right now, but that Major League Baseball has shortened the beginning of their season, or rather canceled or postponed 24 games so far. And with the way Old Man Winter is going right now, I made a joke yesterday that I'd like to break his hip if he keeps this going. I don't know if the beginning of the season can survive this, and we have a poll question related to this, but the bigger question is, should Major League Baseball shorten their season? But I guess your insight, your thoughts on this as we get started here this Wednesday morning, April 18th on the Cheap Seats.
I'd like to file a class action lawsuit against this weather. This has been atrocious. It's been awful. The Boston Marathon on Monday was run in the worst conditions possible. It was rainy. It was sleeting. It was not even fair to any of the runners. And how can they expect people to run a marathon, let alone play a baseball game in this kind of rain? This is one of the worst openings to a baseball season in recent memory.
It is. It is, no doubt about it. One of the worst openings to the season, and you've had the Twins cancel games. You've had the Chicago White Sox cancel games. Pretty much every franchise in a cold weather city has had to cancel games, and you just wonder sort of not only what is this doing to the players, to the media, to the fans, but to the game experience in general, when most people are not going to be going to games right now because they know that once we get to May, June, July, there's going to be much better weather to sit there and enjoy a game. It's just not fun to be a fan at the ballpark right now.
It's not fun to sit there in a midday game at like 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, knowing that, okay, it might rain today and we might have to come back at a different day. People don't have that kind of time. If they have the time to go to the ballpark on one day in April, they have time to go to the ballpark that day in April. Rescheduled games are among the worst things that could happen for things like this because people have to figure out where to get. They have to figure out to sell tickets. They have to figure out to sell parking passes. It's a very tough problem to be in, but it's an easier problem to fix if you just shorten the season.
Yeah, no, I'm I'm right there with you too. I mean, there's a couple of articles penned on this recently. Bob Costas actually penned one where he said, "I would like to see the season shortened." And really quick, if I can go on a tangent, I mean, this isn't just affecting Major League Baseball; it's affecting broadcasters, myself as a play-by-play broadcaster here at my university, that we've already had to either delay, postpone, cancel numerous softball games, numerous baseball games. I'm broadcasting a lacrosse match, women's lacrosse here tonight, and they are a little bit more hardened to the weather than baseball or softball are because of the field conditions. But this is affecting everybody in any major cold weather city right now. And to your point about shortening the season, I'm right there with you, and I think this needs to be done because it'll help the fan experience overall. The players, the groundskeepers, everyone involved won't have to worry about when's this game going to be played. Are we even going to get this game in? It helps the schedule makers and the teams because then you don't have to move these games till later on. And, look, I get it that baseball is trying to draw fans. They're trying to increase and better the fan experience. And if you're a baseball purist, there's no way you want to see the schedule shortened. But if you're a young fan and Major League Baseball wants to get that next generation of fans, what does that say to them if their best memory of being at the ballpark is freezing like a popsicle?
It says it says a lot about baseball, about we're going to just power through this game, and there is a character element to that, but when you're sitting in cold, hard bleacher seats and you're not interested in breathing in more moist air and potentially getting sick, I don't really think there's much character to be built sitting there waiting for the hot dog vendor to show up again. This is among one of the dumber ideas floating out there, that this is the season that can start in late March and carry on through early November. The season is long, and that means the games don't mean as much. I was, again, taking a class on how to cut highlights, and the person teaching it said, you will not understand that this job sucks until you try to make a game in the middle of July between two bad baseball teams mean something.
Yeah, and you, from the perspective of the video editor, too, for you, the thing there is you don't know when a game's going to start. You don't know if you're working for a station or a network, what you're going to have to do to even get those highlights in, if they're even going to happen. So for you, Max, from the perspective of a video editor, there is no certainty with anything as far as a game getting in. Bob Costas put out an article recently, there's an article in USA Today about this, about what needs to happen to change the situation so that fans, broadcasters, everyone involved don't have to deal with this problem. And they floated out the idea that what we need to do here is either start the season later in mid-April so that, unlike this year, you might in future Aprils have a better weather to deal with, but then also either shortening interleague play or getting rid of it entirely. And if that means to me, as far as getting a full season in and getting a full enjoyment of a baseball season in, to do that, then you go ahead and you do it.
I think the one thing that I would take caution on eliminating interleague play is you have a potential of eliminating some big-time inter-regional rivalries that have developed over the last few years, like the Subway Series in New York, like the Beltway Series in D.C. and Baltimore, like the Freeway Series in Los Angeles. You run the risk of eliminating something that fans really do look forward to, but if you limit interleague play to say, all right, we're not going to necessarily have Colorado fly to Boston or something like that where there's just nothing there, but you could look at potentially LA Angels and LA Dodgers. You limit it to what really matters and you limit it to the regional areas, then there's something to be said there. but don't get rid of it completely. The fans do enjoy it a little too much.
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think for the baseball purists, they've always had, since the 60s and the expansion of the playoffs, you've always had interleague play. You've always had that stretch during the season that you can look forward to and say, yes, as an Angels fan, we are going to play the Dodgers, right? But on the other side, what you were saying is that getting rid of those series that are a little less important, like the Rockies playing Boston, or give me some other examples. There's other ones that people just don't care about that wouldn't matter, but you keep those integral interleague series matchups that have some history and have some rivalry to them.
Well, let's just look up and down the standings. How many people are going to pay to see the Cleveland Indians take on the Miami Marlins?
Well, if you've been a Marlins fan, and there are not that many of them, not many when your Double-A team outdraws you.
You make a great point. How about the San Francisco Giants against the, the Baltimore Orioles?
Does anyone care about Baltimore and the Giants? I don't think so.
I think the individual cities might care, but that's not a huge draw. Let's go to Seattle. How about the Mariners against the Braves?
I think there's even less of an interest in that from my perspective. And yes, the individual cities and fans might have them, but I certainly don't.
How about this? The Brewers. Let's have them fly to Toronto. Is anyone interested in that?
Maple Leafs fans are too busy with the Stanley Cup playoffs right now.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But I bring up these examples of these seemingly across the area cities that they're across the country. The teams that are involved, there's limited, and I mean very limited, action going on between a Miami and a Chicago. There's just not anything there. You don't need to create something there.
No, you don't need to make something or create something that isn't there, that already doesn't have some backstory to that. And I think we can put this in the context of, yes, cold weather in baseball, it's horrible. It's a sport that's played outside. Nobody wants this. But also, we complain about this cold weather in baseball, but at a football game, right, you have guys there. They don't have their shirts on. Their faces and chests are painted. It's almost like a badge of honor to be shirtless at a cold weather football game. So if I'm looking at it from that perspective, what does that say about us as a sports culture and as a fan, that it means something in terms of your reputation and your overall tough guy nature to be shirtless at a football game, but at a baseball game we complain about that. Where do you draw the line there?
I draw the line and include all of it as saying we're all kind of acting a little ridiculous.
We're all nuts?
We're all nuts.
I would never be that guy, by the way, that would be shirtless and having paint on their chest.
I mean, I might do that for like a really warm September game, potentially, if I actually went to the gym and improved my own physique. But I'm not going to stand there in the frozen tundra of Green Bay, or heck, even in the rain in D.C., I'm not going to stand out there without a shirt and without any protection in the middle of December or November. No way.
Max, come on. You got to be, your reputation is on the line. People will talk.
What reputation?
Your cold weather tough guy reputation.
No. No. I don't have that. Since when did you get the impression that I was a cold weather tough guy, Jeff?
No, of course you don't have that. Well, you don't have that reputation now, and you'll never have it. In any event,
I don't want it.
In any event, as we continue to talk about baseball shortening their season, should it be shortened for the fan experience? And what about interleague play? Does that matter to you guys listening out there this morning on the cheap seats here on Public House Media? Do you care enough about interleague play outside of the important rivalries? Show us if you care. Go to the Facebook page right now, Cheap Seats Sports Podcast on Facebook. Vote in our poll question, should the MLB shorten its season due to weather and some of the worst weather we've seen this year, where more games have been canceled since 2007?
Short answer, yes. That's just the short answer I can give you is yeah. Shorten the season, make it like 140-something games. Those games will mean more. If they have fewer games, you're going to have the games mean more down the stretch. You can't just win your way after like a 10-game losing streak and say, yeah, we'll get it next week. No, that 10-game losing streak is going to mean something.
It will mean something, and you're right, you can't use the excuse of later in the season to say, oh, we're down in the division right now, we're down in the wild card chase. We have interleague games coming up, and though they might mean as much as divisional games, we'll make up that ground that we lost in interleague. You can't do that anymore. And think about this. We talk about, or I guess we, being the media, wants there to be more offense in professional baseball. How much better are hitters going to look, like Mike Trout going to look when we start a season in mid-April and the weather's already warmed up and the balls are flying out of the ballpark more than we would in, say, 20 or 30-degree weather? And how much would that not only mean to the excitement of the games, but for the players to be rounding more into form come April and not having to freeze their butts off in March?
I think there's just... Okay, Jeff, I want you to see if you agree with this theory. Tim Kirkjian once told me this. There are 3 leagues in baseball: the American League, the National League, and the disabled list.
I can agree with that. Sure. Keep going.
I'm going to go on this one because the DL is piled up with names that continuously see their way on that list, and part of it is because of field conditions when the game is cold. Xander Bogaerts recently had a cracked ankle because he slid across wet dirt into the Orioles' dugout. This is going to be a problem. Players get hurt in bad weather conditions. I'm more impressed that teams that played in the horrible weather, like the Cubs a couple days ago, those guys didn't come away with any serious injuries. The players are going to play better when the field conditions are right and the game is finally in warm weather. If you want to protect the game, have this protect the players, play the game in warm weather or play the game in a dome. I mean, that didn't help Toronto a couple days ago, but play the game in a dome.
Players do perform better, and I haven't done all the extensive research to look at the numbers. I'm sure some geek out there has done the numbers about performance and batting average and extra base hits in cold weather. Didn't affect the Cubs the other day, but I certainly think that you look at all these things combined, the fan experience, safety of the fans, you shorten interleague play to the series that don't matter, and then you talk about the players performing better. And I think across the board, Costas makes a great point. I think we make a great point, and I want to see what the fans think in our poll question. Should Major League Baseball shorten the season to account for cold weather and make it so that more games are played in warm weather? Go to our Facebook page right now, or phmedia.com. Our Facebook page is Cheap Seats Sports Podcast. You can follow us. Give us a follow on Facebook. Like us there. Follow us on Twitter at Jeff J. Chiles. Max?
At MAX_WOLPOFF.
All right, vote there today on our poll question. We thank you for tuning in on this Wednesday, April 18th, frigid April 18th, as we are freezing our butts off in the nosebleeds in the cheap seats today. We're going to have to bring some hand warmers to this next segment. Get your hot cocoa, get your hot chocolate. We move from the cheap seats in a frigid baseball stadium to the cheap seats on the ice, the National Hockey League and the Stanley Cup Playoffs. We'll talk about all those series, look at the West, look at the East, preview the games tonight on Wednesday, look back at Monday and Tuesday, that and more. You're listening to the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Sleigh bells ring, are you listening in the lane?
Welcome back to the Cheap Seats podcast and Public House Media. I hope you're enjoying Christmas. Oh, I'm sorry, was that 5 months ago? It feels like Christmas, though. It feels like Christmas with this weather outside. What's that?
It feels like it, absolutely. The weather outside, it's like One time I was asking a friend of mine, hey, Andrew, what day is it today? It's like, it is April 8th. What day is it outside? It is a January 20th.
Yo, Old Man River, zip it or I'll break your hip. That's how I feel right now. That's what I want to do to Old Man Winter after this weather. But thankfully, we're not in the exposed, chilly air of the ballpark anymore. We moved to the ice and the National Hockey League and the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Max, wow, what series that we've had in this first round. I think it's everything that I was hoping for. They looked a little shaky to begin with. It looked like the Pittsburgh and Tampa and Boston, as we look in the East here to start, may just have ran away with these things, but now we have some series.
Thank goodness, too. I mean, I was expecting, all right, Pittsburgh comes in. Oh, boy, here we go again. 3-time champs. Oh, boy, let me hear it. Let me hear the pity party. Shut up! I've had enough. And Philly thankfully had enough in Game 2. I was so happy when they took the split in that. Thank goodness. Shut your mouths and watch a hockey game. It's too fun to even say remotely that anybody can win the Stanley Cup after one game. I'm excited that these series are finally evening up. Heck, the Colorado Avalanche took the Predators to their own barn a couple nights ago in Pepsi Center. I was thrilled for the Avalanche. Finally, they scored first in every game this series, and this time they were actually able to hold on to a lead.
Yeah, all these series now, for the most part, from, if we look a couple of days ago, Monday night, Boston now leads the Leafs 2-1. Tampa Bay still leads 2-1, but a comeback and a resounding answer from the Devils to split that series in half. You're right. Colorado with a vengeance comes back on Nashville and proves that it is tougher to win in the thin air in Denver. And then San Jose crushing Anaheim 8-1 in a complete mauling to go up 3-0. I want to go back to what you said about Philly and Pittsburgh in this first series. We all thought, I did after Game 1, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin leading the way. I really thought this would be a cakewalk. You're right. I was right in line with you. Oh, Pittsburgh, 3 cups in a row. No chance for Philly. Philly responded with a big win in Game 2, and then to split that series in half and leave it where we have it now at 2-1. And you look at this series, Max, Pittsburgh, their special teams are the reason they're leading this series 2-1. But the number one reason they're leading this series, 4 of 11 on the power play through Monday night, perfect on the penalty kill in both wins in this series. But Phil Kessel, I think, and Derek Brassard are playing at a different level right now and being that secondary reason that Pittsburgh has the 2-1 edge.
Let me just tell you the first power play unit for the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a courtesy of Daily Faceoff. Evgeny Malkin, Sidney Crosby, Patrick Hornqvist, Phil Kessel, and Chris Letang. Are you kidding me?
That's their number one power play unit. That's not fair.
How is this fair? How is it fair?
Well, it's not fair to Philadelphia to have to I do not envy Philadelphia having to defend this power play at this. I mean, it is an absurdly good power play. Again, 4 of 11. We saw that, on Monday night in that Game 3, that Pittsburgh they're getting more shots on goal in this series. And they're finding the one-timers from Malkin in the circle, on the wing, on the side of the goal. Pittsburgh, unlike Game 2 where they had problems on their own penalty kill, where they were giving up chances to Philly in the front of the net, that didn't happen. They took that away. Pittsburgh defensively also is playing better. And Philly's offense has been pretty non-existent in this first 3 games, even with the 1 win. And
Philadelphia has had good offense when their main players have been going, like the Girouxs and the Voraceks. Now that if they don't have those main guys going, and even with Wayne Simmons in that category, you start to really see the problems Philadelphia is going to have. They're pretty weak at the back end, aside from maybe their young puck mover in Shane Gostisbehere. They just don't have the control of the middle of the ice like the Penguins do. And that's where you're going to win a series in the defensive end, in the middle of the ice and taking away quality chances. Philadelphia hasn't done that.
You're wondering where that's going to come from, right? Offensively for them in this series. And you mentioned a few names, Sean Gostisbehere, Couturier in this series. You expect a little bit more out of him. Jacob Voracek, who has just not performed, I don't think, in this series. And you wonder if Philadelphia, they've talked about it after games that we need to be faster. We need to have more speed. Like you said, Max, down the middle of the ice. We need to put pressure on Pittsburgh's defense because as we showed in Game 2, we can put the puck in the net and we can create offense and make it happen. But the problem for Philadelphia, at least from my perspective in this series, is that it's not offensively. It's not trying to solve Matt Murray. It's that when you spend that much time on the penalty kill that they've spent in this series, you don't have time for your line combinations. You don't have time to create offensively on your forecheck between Voracek and Couturier like they normally can with their passing. That just isn't there because they're killing too much penalties.
And by the time they're done killing the penalties, they're already in a deep enough hole that they have to start rolling 3 lines and get desperate. They've just dug themselves holes in the 2 games that they've lost. They can't afford to dig another one.
It's not there. It's not there for Philly if the offense doesn't start to click. Pittsburgh-Philly, Game 3 tonight in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. Pittsburgh leads that series 2-1. Moving on really quickly to, you touched on it a little bit, Nashville Predators and the Colorado Avalanche. Nashville now in this series only leads 2-1 after Colorado a couple of nights ago waking up offensively and showing that they will not go away quietly in this series. Nashville in the first 2 games had outscored Colorado 10-6, but Colorado has home ice. And just like those great Avalanche teams in the 90s and 2000s, that is a very tough place for a visitor to win when they are playing at the Pepsi Center in the regular season. Colorado 28-11-2 in Denver. And you saw it on Monday night. The offense is there now, and it's not only coming from Nathan McKinnon, but it's coming from other factors as well. Colorado now has gotten back into the series.
And good thing for Colorado as well. Their depth was a huge question mark heading up against Nashville's defense. But when they started JT Compher and that 4th line,
go blue.
When they started Compher and his line against Nashville at home, I think that was a huge confidence from their head coach, Jared Bednar, that this is my line. These guys are going to start this game. And you know what? They paid him back with a goal. I can't argue with it.
They did, and I think that line combination has changed, and I can tell you from watching JT Compher as a college player, yes, he has the scoring ability, but when you put him with talented forwards, he's a very good puck mover, strong distributor. He can move the puck better than anybody when he has it on his stick. I think it was more surprising to me in this series that, again, like the other series in the playoffs, it looked like Nashville was going to run away with this thing, and then somehow, through a combination of excellent goaltending and a strong start, and that's what they needed, Como scored on a weird goal to put them up 1-0. Bork made it 2-0, and then McKinnon in this series, his second goal in the series, it was 3-0 Colorado. Like, it wasn't like they had a 1-goal lead. They were enjoying a heavy lead in Game 3.
And that really speaks a lot to the character of this Colorado team. Last year, they couldn't get a break. They had everything go wrong for them. Everything was bad. They were the unluckiest team in hockey. This year, you start to get a couple of those breaks. You start to win a couple of games. Suddenly, they really started to realize they're a good team that ran into a bad situation last year. This year, they were a good team in a better situation, and they were the last team into the playoffs.
Just goes to show, I mean, just like we talk about the tournament, if you get in, you can make things happen. And for Colorado, between a combination of some of their offensive skill in that game and then the goaltending, for Colorado, they didn't even know who their goaltender was going to be going into the series.
Yeah, they didn't. Still, Semyon Varlamov's done for the year, but Jonathan Bernier has really come on strong. He had a good Game 3. He's had a couple of stinkers in the opening part of it, but playing in Nashville as a goalie for the opposition, hey, yeah, good luck. You're not going to sign me up for that anytime soon.
Bernier, quite the present surprise as we move along here and look at the Stanley Cup playoffs. This morning, this April 18th, Wednesday, here in the Cheap Seats. Glad you could join us and listening wherever you're listening, PH Media, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts. Thanks for listening as we roll on here on the Cheap Seats. Look, our one last point on this series is that going into it, Max, Nashville, they had a 12-game winning streak against Colorado. Colorado had not beaten Nashville in 2 years. I think that's changed. I think with their forecheck and their skill players, they're figuring out that they can get behind Arvidsson and Roman Josi and all the stalwarts, Shea Weber on D for Nashville. Colorado has been sneakily good on their forecheck, and I have to wonder if they can continue it for sure, but they've shown now that they can score in this series.
Jeff, you just said Shea Weber was on Nashville.
Weber, excuse me. I have flashbacks to 2 years ago, man.
I'm sorry, what year is this?
It's 2018.
Yeah, thank you. PK Subban.
Subban. I have a lot of negative memories from Nashville and Weber crunching Zetterberg's face into the boards. I'm not going to say I had a concussion from that, but I apologize, my friend.
Yeah, it probably didn't feel too good just watching that, because that's something that you as a human being empathize with that.
Oh boy. Forgive my mistake, Cheap Seats listeners. Big mistake, but we're going to move on in our look at the Stanley Cup playoffs. San Jose and Anaheim, and the Sharks right now, with all their acquisitions at the trade deadline, they are blowing out Anaheim in this series. It has not even been a competitive series. The big guns for Colorado right now are playing at an extremely high level. San Jose, after last night, up 3-0 in this series and an 8-1 blowout over Anaheim. And it's never good for a team that goes down 3-0 in the series. And if you're San Jose, you started out 2-0 going on the road, and you win this series statistically 79% of the time. But let's remember that San Jose, Max, has been here before, and they've choked before up 3-0 to LA in 2014. I don't know if that's going to be the case this time. I think San Jose does have the stranglehold in the series, but you can never count out a team that has blown a 3-0 series lead in the recent past.
And I really still can't count out the playoff Anaheim Ducks. They do still have a very good roster. The only real trouble has been the play of John Gibson in net. Gibson was injured before the start of the season. We can't forget that. He has not played very well in this series, and losing Cam Fowler at the back end has not helped at all on defense. They've had to really rely on Hampus Lindholm, and they're just going to ride that guy through the concrete if they keep throwing him out there for 25, 27 minutes a night. They can't keep doing this to him. He's not going to be able to keep up with the faster San Jose team and a fresher San Jose team that has much better depth.
Anaheim can't really compete with that depth right now, and the Sharks have too much speed, too much skating ability, too many big shooters on that roster, I think, for Anaheim to get back into this series at this point. Anaheim even saw it last night. I mean, now that they're down 3-0, not that they are gonna goon it up, although they do have that moniker and they have that history with Ryan Getzel and Corey Perry. But Anaheim almost has looked a little bit desperate. On Monday night. They started to hit San Jose more. They did a little bit more rough stuff after the whistle, doing whatever they can to slow down San Jose because, let's face it, they don't have the horses to keep up here to play against Joe Pavelski when he's playing 20 minutes a game, when he had 3 assists to start the series. Anaheim is going to resort to anything they can to chip it up, get it a little bit dirty, and wear down San Jose, but I don't think it matters at this point.
Honestly, Anaheim is that guy in a chariot race that has spikes attached to his wheels. He may not have the fastest horse, but if he pulls up next to you, he's going to take out your wheels and just try to ruin your day. Anaheim can play playoff hockey. And yeah, I watched Ben-Hur. Give me a break. They can play playoff hockey, and they know how to get under your skin. I can see them taking one game, but I don't see them coming back from the depths and winning this series.
No, I don't think so either. And if you're a San Jose fan and, you go to the finals a couple of years ago and you deal with that disappointment, now you make that trade deadline acquisition, getting Evander Kane. So far in this series, Evander Kane has scored 2 goals for San Jose. He's made a lot of other plays offensively that haven't shown up on the score sheet. Logan Couture entering the game Monday night, 2 points. He scored another goal, that first goal to put his team up 1-0. And then you sort of ask John Gibson, who you said has already been injured, to duel head-to-head with Martin Jones, who had a shutout in Game 1 and had a great performance in Game 2. It's just not in the cards, I don't think, for Anaheim.
Right now, Anaheim has a lot of soul-searching to do, and if they want to really take this series, they've got to get better play from Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlaf. They have to.
They have to. I mean, can it be done, though? That's the question. I mean, can they provide enough offensive punch? I don't know, my friend. I don't know if we're going to see that from the rest of the series from Anaheim. It looks to be pretty firmly in San Jose's grasp. We'll wrap up right now. We'll come back. More NHL, more Stanley Cup playoffs. Max and Geoff Chiles here with you in the Cheap Seats on this Wednesday morning. Back after this, more Stanley Cup playoffs on the Cheap Seats podcast on the Public House Media Radio Network.
Everybody, this is Christian Heimel, host of Press Row here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Press Row, where we talk about the biggest issues in sports with the analysts, experts, and reporters who cover them. No nonsense, hard-hitting interviews on the sports topics you're talking about. A new show comes out every single Thursday. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Press Row. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hello, hockey fans. Welcome back to the broadcast booth. Jeffrey Chiles, Max Wolpoff here with you from the Cheap Seats. We're not in the broadcast booth. We're talking Stanley Cup playoffs. Excellent first round so far. Hope you're enjoying our discussion this morning. We've worked through a few series, Max, and now it's time to work through one that I was really surprised on Monday night to see what New Jersey did, but they smacked Tampa Bay in the mouth after getting down in the series 2-0. Devils are back in it. It's a series, and what a performance from Corey Schneider playing in his first playoff game since 2013. That was 5 years ago.
Yeah, back when the Devils made the Stanley Cup final. Wow, I forgot that even happened.
Well, the Tampa Bay Lightning know who Corey Schneider is now, and they know what happened to them on Monday night. The Devils knocking around Tampa Bay in this series, and the Devils fans, I think, were pinning a lot of hopes on Taylor Hall in this series and the rest of the rooks for the Devils, and lo and behold, the rookies come through. Taylor Hall now with 2 goals on the playoffs. Just a great talent to watch for the Devils in this series. And I got to be honest, I thought Tampa Bay's defense, whether it's Nemestikov, whether it's Victor Hedman back there, all the pieces that Tampa Bay has on the blue line and in goal would just completely shut down Taylor Hall. But that goes to show you, when you have a great talent like Taylor Hall in this Devils offense, it's as good a defense as Tampa has. It's so hard to keep a team down.
And this is really going to be a good spot to see. New Jersey got the favorable matchups because when you're the home team in hockey, you get the last line change after every stoppage. The away team has to throw out their players first, and then the home team gets to do this. This really allowed the Devils staff to really hone in on getting Taylor Hall, Will Butcher, the best matchups possible. And for their sake, it brought out the best game Taylor Hall's had in his playoff career, which is a grand total of 3 games.
Well, it just goes to show that, right? I mean, even as a younger player, that he wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't in the limelight too much or afraid of the spotlight for sure. And I think this not only means for this series, no matter what happens to the Devils, but for the future for Will Butcher and for Taylor Hall and the young guns for the Devs, that they are going to be a force to be reckoned with in the East a long time. I'm not saying I know how long Corey Schneider is going to be playing, and I think the Devils definitely have some goaltending questions once he hangs it up, but this is just a freewheeling, fun New Jersey team that can make plays. And when the series was 2-0, and Kucherov started the series with 4 points, Andre Palat had a goal and 3 assists, and Tyler Johnson were skating all over New Jersey, all over the Devils zone in the first 2 games. Like a lot of these series, you can't judge it by one game because it looked like Tampa Bay was in control. And Tampa Bay, even last night, on their power play in the series, went 2 for 5. Monday night, 2 for 5. And then now they have 5 goals on the power play of this series. New Jersey has still got some questions, I think, to figure out on their specialty teams and specifically on the penalty kill, because if you let those Tampa Bay forwards move the puck at will on the power play and find the openings and boom those shots on goal on Schneider can have one of the best games in the world, but A, if he can't see the puck, he's going to have problems, and B, you have to do something to get those big Tampa Bay bodies out front of the net and do something to slow down the Tampa power play.
It's not like the Devils didn't have their chances on the power play. They did, but their one really good look came when it was 5-on-3, and you're pretty much expected to score on those. They had a guy parked in front of Vasilevsky's eyes. He couldn't see where the shot was going, and when he peeked around the guy's left side, the shot went to his right side, and he could not recover in time. That is one of the few times the Devils have had a good look on the advantage, and they've looked bad on the power play because, again, Tampa has Tampa. They've got thunderbolts stored upon thunderbolts ready to rain terror down on the league.
Oh, they're like Thor, I guess, right? The hammer of the gods. They have all those lightning bolts in this series. Moving on to our next series in the Stanley Cup Playoffs, the Vegas Golden Knights and the Los Angeles Kings. The upstart Knights. I guess you can't really call them upstarts anymore. William Karlsson scoring his first goal on Sunday in this series. Vegas had a 3-1 lead on Sunday before LA had a late charge. Anze Kopitar, the talented forward for the Kings and a potential Hart Trophy winner this year. Great regular season. Hasn't been so great in this series. Looking at this series, and we've seen Vegas get the goaltending that they want from Marc-Andre Fleury, but LA is just outside of Kopitar not creating enough, I think, so far to make this a series.
And LA has had so much trouble getting their depth players to play up to the level of their stars. One of the biggest things that they had going for them in their 2 Stanley Cup runs, they were able to get great play out of people that no one had heard of prior to the start of puck drop. The Kings don't have that right now. And if the Golden Knights are going to move on, they've relied on their team speed, decent goaltending, and puck-moving defense. Those are the 3 keys they've had, and the Golden Knights have used them all season, and I don't really care what anyone's saying about them petering out, or this is where they come back to earth, or this is where reality hits them. The playoffs are so different. This team's built for the playoffs. They're built with speed. This is the new playoffs. The playoffs are not what they used to be. The game is not what it used to be. This is not a matter of people getting bigger, people getting stronger, and it's more physical, and it's more rough and tumble, and you got to know what you can get away with. It's now about getting fast. It's now about creating your own luck. And Vegas has done that all year.
Yeah, great point. I mean, they are the new normal as far as the playoffs, and not that you didn't need great goaltending in the past, but Vegas doesn't play like an expansion team with Marc-Andre Fleury back there. They don't play like an expansion team with Karlsson, and like you said, especially, I think the biggest point right there, puck-moving defensemen. That is such a premium, and the Golden Knights for an expansion team have such a luxury of having those defensemen back in the blue line. They can bring the puck up the ice in transition, run the power play, lay the body on if you need them to. Just a great, solid Vegas Knights team, and kind of like in the first couple of series that we talked about where a team is going to try to verbally work their way back into the series, you need to do it on the ice, and LA sticks and stones may break their bones, but words will not do anything for them in this series.
It's just not going to be the same without LA in the playoffs. They had a great run, but Vegas is going to go places, and if they still keep their style, if they don't get caught up in the physical nature of what other teams might think the playoffs are about, if they keep their speed, they're going to win.
Certainly looks that way, for sure, when you look at this series and what Vegas has been able to do. And now we move on to this last series, and we have something special planned for Max in a little bit. But before we get to that, so we call a tease in the business, before we get to that, we're going to look at this Winnipeg-Minnesota series, and I feel like a broken record. Like we've said in these other series, I thought that Winnipeg, with their talented D, with Jacob Trouba back there, Kyle Connor up front, Andrew Kopp, I'm rattling off all the Michigan Wolverines because that's what I'm rooting for. I've sort of taken Winnipeg under my wing with all the Wolverines on the roster. But Winnipeg looked like they were going to run away with it. Dubnyk looked like a shell of his former self in the start of the series. And then, lo and behold, a 6-2 wild thrashing of Winnipeg in which Dubnyk looks like a completely different player. I mean, what do you make of the series right now?
I make of it the same way that I made the last couple of series, like the Predators and the Avalanche. It's a team that clearly is superior in Winnipeg, but when they go into Minnesota, you don't want to play in Minnesota if you don't have to as the opposition. Minnesota is a city that will chew up and spit out an opponent. They are very good at home. Minnesota does not lose to the same degree that they lose on the road, especially come playoff time. They are so good in their own yard. They had the motivation they needed, and they got favorable matchups for a seemingly weaker team depth-wise. Minnesota has been able to take advantage of their chances to get Eric Staal and his line and Mikko Koivu and his line the matchups they need to have some success.
Well, not just Staal. I mean, we're talking about the big names for the Wild in this series. How about Zach Parise, who, even despite the first two losses in those games, looked like he was playing pretty well in this series, and then he finally put the cherry on top in Game 3, scoring his third goal of the playoffs. Minnesota now, I still don't think they're going to win this series, but they've shown Winnipeg that they're still there, that they're not going away, and that defensively, too, has been a bit of a surprise to me with Nick Seeler, their rookie defenseman, back in the lineup. He has been able to limit Patrick Laine pretty effectively in the series, and that's not something I thought I'd see.
And honestly, if Eric Staal is looking like a younger self, and I really want to know how he invented time travel. Somehow Eric Staal went back in time, found a younger version of himself, transported him to today, and lo and behold, he's looking like Eric Staal of years and years ago. I'm curious to see how that time machine. Mr. Staal, may I have a word with you?
Yeah, Minnesota, I think they're not going to scare you with Suter and Parise in those first two lines just by themselves, but they are getting contributions from the third and fourth line, and that is neutralizing Winnipeg's first and second line, and I think that's been making a difference so far in this series. Now, a quick introduction, and then the floor will be Max Wolpoff's. Columbus and Washington, after Washington losing a heartbreaking game in Game 2, the Jackets winning 5-4 in overtime. Max, your Capital in a position that they've seen far too often.
Jeff, I'm going to tell you the same thing I will tell anybody who brings this up to me from now until the playoffs are over. Shut up. I've had enough of the pity. I've had enough of being told, oh, woe are the Capitals. I pity them so much. They have Ovechkin and they can't do anything. I don't want your pity. I don't want your shame. I don't want your jokes. I have had absolutely enough of being shamed for being a Washington Capitals fan. I grew up in D.C., and I'm a kid from D.C. I'm going to carry that with me until I am dead and gone, and I will carry the Washington Capitals with me until I am dead and gone. I will support this team until the bitter end. They may make decisions that make no sense. They may make the wrong decision and have the right result. They may make the right decision and have the wrong result. I am ready to accept the fate of this team because it's a sports event. This is supposed to be entertaining. This is supposed to be fun. I'm okay if the Capitals lose here in the first round. I'm fine if they get swept. I'm fine with it. They weren't supposed to contend this year at all. Making the playoffs and winning the division alone, this was beyond anything I expected. I'm happy with how this team succeeded in the regular season. I want them to win the Stanley Cup. I hope they win the Stanley Cup. Dang it, hockey should hope that Alex Ovechkin wins the Stanley Cup. The entire sport needs to take up arms against the mob boss in Pittsburgh that is running roughshod over the league and is making sure that no other team is able to win the Stanley Cup because he has everybody by the, "So, what are you going to do for me today?" line from The Godfather. I've had enough. I've had it. I've just had it.
Well, you talked about how you're going to be a Caps fan when you're dead and gone. I feel like after that rant, I feel like you want me dead and gone.
Jeff, I have nothing against you as a person, but I've had enough of people telling me and saying to me the jokes.
Okay.
I've had enough of the jokes.
Okay, that's fine, but remember, I'm not the collective everyone. I'm not. My goal in there was not to offend you, but to merely give you a platform. Remember, buddy, you don't think that I feel your pain. We've had it pretty miserable in Detroit as far as sports the last few years. And remember, I've dealt with the Lions my whole life, man. At least you've had a team in the playoffs that's good.
Oh, boy. Here we go. Now you want me to bring up your city. Detroit, you made the playoffs for 25 straight years. You got a couple Stanley Cups out of that run. In fact,
yes,
I think you beat the Capitals in one of those runs. Shut up. You don't know pain. You don't get it.
I don't know NHL pain. I do know NFL pain and MLB pain, but that's for another show. That is for another day.
Jeff, let me tell you something. If there's a sport to suck in, it's probably baseball or hockey. You know why? Because when you're a hockey team and you suck, you can still win 20 games. You know what that is? 20 high fives with your buddies. You know what happens when you suck in football? You win no games, and then you sit in NFL traffic, and everyone is sad.
I don't know if I'm sad or inspired after listening to Max Wolpoff go on his rant today. He wanted the time. We gave him the floor, and I think he laid that out beautifully. The pain, encapsulated the pain of being a Caps fan. Thank you, Max.
I do what I can. I've needed that. And, Jeff, if that came across as something personal at you, it wasn't.
I was a lightning rod because you and I are the only people speaking to one another at this moment. You, unfortunately, could not direct that rant live at NHL fans, at the masses. But I'll take the beating for today. I'll be the lightning rod today.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. Thank you, my friend.
All right. There he is, Max Wolpoff in all his glory, telling it how it is with the Capitals. We're going to move on here in the Cheap Seats. We'll take a quick break. Be sure to go to our Facebook page, Cheap Seats Sports Podcast. Vote on our poll question. Should Major League Baseball shorten the season? We'll come back, and when we come back, quick look at the NBA and what's going on right now as far as draft stock. We're going to take a look at Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Wagner really, really briefly, then get to our Wild Wednesday, then wrap it up. It's Wednesday morning, April 18th. It's the Cheap Seats. Max Wolpoff, Jeffrey Chiles. Back in a bit here on the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
This is Katie, co-host of Coffee with Keith and Katie here on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Coffee with Keith and Katie, where we talk about the adventures of our daily lives and relationship. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Friday at 8:30 p.m. Central. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Coffee with Keith and Katie. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to the Cheap Seats here on Public House Media. I just want to let Max know that I would not choose my friends over him, even after that rant. I'm okay.
I think that reference is over my head. I'm sorry. What was that?
Oh, it's this song. It's this song. The song is Choose My Friends Over You. Yeah.
I've never heard it. It's a good song. I'm gonna want this song in a second. I don't think I've.
This takes me back to the early
2000s.
Yeah, it takes me back to the early 2000s.
Yeah, this was before I had any measure of musical, what's it called, acumen. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yep. That rant was everything we all wanted. We hope you enjoyed it on the cheap seats. Max Wolpoff, Jeffrey Chiles, Christian Heimel back in studio running things for us on that. And great discussion on the Stanley Cup Playoffs in the NHL. We hope you get a lot out of that. We enjoy bringing it to you each week on the cheap seats. Now, we're still a ways away from this, Max, but the NBA draft is not, and the lottery is not until June, but there's a couple of names recently that have declared for the NBA draft. They've hired agents. Wendell Carter Jr., the Duke freshman, no longer a Duke freshman, and now Mo Wagner finishing up his junior year at Michigan. These two players stuck out to me a little bit because I think they're two of the more intriguing players to have a chance to go higher in the draft this year. And I wanted to look at them and their skill sets a little bit intently, but also talk about what they are leaving behind and what will happen now to Duke and what will happen to Michigan. First off, Wendell Carter Jr., who's an absolutely fabulous player for the Blue Devils in Durham. And he's a guy that I think sometimes he's not the biggest player. He's not the most explosive player. But I still think he is going to go decently high in the first round. I don't think he's going to be top 15, top 10 pick. But for Wendell Carter Jr., 6'10", got a 7'3" wingspan. And the advantage for him in this draft is not many players any longer can both shoot and then operate facing away from the basket and looking at the basket as well. He's a very skilled big man. He will overwhelm smaller players and use his hands really well, finishes around the basket, and is going to be a really big asset to an NBA team as far as his offensive rebounding. Can play in the post. He can step outside and shoot as well. But for him, though, he's going to – I think a lot of scouts have talked about how he doesn't have the explosiveness at times. He's not overly focused all 60 minutes of a college basketball game. And he's got to work on that as we look forward to the draft. But when you look at Wendell Carter and you look at what he does have, so many skills and so many tools on that Swiss Army knife, it's going to be hard for a lot of teams to pass up on the big man Wendell Carter.
It's going to be tough to pass up on some of these names that have declared for the draft young and good, like the DeAndre Aytons, the Marvin Bagleys, even going down the list to the Trae Youngs in these mock drafts. I'm curious to see whether these teams are more inclined to draft for position or draft for best player available. Whereas what does each team need once the season's over versus what each team is going to need within their own roster. The best player available by most metrics from what I've read is DeAndre Ayton, but not every team is going to necessarily need DeAndre Ayton.
Well, for Wendell Carter, too, and now that he moves on from Duke and moves on from Durham, Mike Krzyzewski, you know that he's always going to have great talent in the wings. He already does have that. The young man's name is escaping me, but he's a mountain of a man playing at the 5, at the center position. That's not totally going to replace Wendell Carter's production or Marvin Bagley's production. But for Carter, Duke now, and now Grayson Allen has moved on as well, they are basically missing a point guard, a shooting guard, a forward, and they're missing that stretch 4 kind of scoring. They're missing a guy that can step out and shoot. They're missing Carter's burliness and his attentiveness on the glass for Duke. And I'm not going to say that Duke is going to totally be irrelevant next year, but, I mean, even with the talent coming in, and we know Krzyzewski can mold it, no Allen, no Bagley, no back to the basket Wendell Carter, no stretch 4 Wendell Carter, no jump shooter Wendell Carter, no size Wendell Carter. Duke's going to have some problems figuring out their chemistry next season.
They're going to have some trouble, especially, but this is something that every elite college basketball program is going to go through every single year. You bring in a bunch of talented freshmen, they run the show for a year, and then they leave. This is something that the Duke model, the Kentucky model, go down the list of all the elite programs. They bring in the best talent in the country for 1 year, and this is the year every single thing has to change. They keep bringing in so many young guys. I'm still struggling to find that they're going to be irrelevant per se. No, Duke is still going to be good. Granted, they're in a decent conference and they're going to have plenty of competition in that regard, but they're going to have fine players coming in. I'm not going to doubt Krzyzewski's knowledge as a recruiter.
No, and you shouldn't. And I think the proof is in the pudding, and Mike Krzyzewski has proven that before. Our other look at a player leaving college basketball and declaring for the NBA draft, Michigan junior Mo Wagner, the 6'2", 233-pound big man who came to Ann Arbor as a very, very raw product. Now he leaves as a probably a late first-round or early second-round draft pick. Michigan now loses a huge piece to their roster going into next year, and you don't see Mo Wagner's walking down the street every day. These players are not a dime a dozen. Mo Wagner, yes, he has his weaknesses, but I've watched him for a few years now. He is one of the more talented big men that can shoot, I think, that we've seen in a while. He says that he's modeled his game after Dirk Nowitzki. It's hard to call anyone Dirk Nowitzki 2.0, but Mo Wagner, still young, has about the bigger skill set that you can imagine that can at least come somewhat close to that. I mean, Wagner is a brilliant outside shooter. He can hit the three. He will take you behind the back, take you off the dribble, and get to the glass. Has really improved his low post scoring. He has worked on his up and under move when he has the basketball below the basket. He's smart. He knows where he has to be on the floor. He knows his playbook. He is and you can't even really say prototypical there, but such a Swiss Army knife of a player. That's really a cliche, but it does really describe him because he can shoot, dribble, take you off the bounce, back up to the basket. He is going to be a very good NBA player now that he's had this tutelage under John Beilein. I don't think it's going to be top 15 or even the first round. I think it's probably going to be in the second round. But he does have a lot to work on as he enters the draft. The release on the jumper still needs some work. That's not quite where it needs to be. His passing at the NBA level is a little bit raw. The rebounding is a problem for him, and we saw that all year at Michigan watching him. He's not to be counted on even with his size. Rebounding, that's going to be an issue. And then really his footwork down low. He has the paint skills, but the footwork needs to be better at the NBA level.
And to just add to the Dirk Nowitzki 2.0, both of them are German. Nowitzki is just 1 inch taller at 7 foot tall.
Nowitzki was Wagner's rival, or his inspiration. He actually had his poster on his wall as a young man.
Well, that's what happens when you grow up in Germany. You have your one person who is big in any sport ever. You look up to that person, and I credit a lot of Nowitzki for creating this big basketball team in Germany that may or may not contend for something in a couple of years as a national team. Granted, the U.S. is probably still going to win gold.
Yeah. I mean, they're probably still going to walk all over these teams. And that's our look at Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Wagner, two intriguing names that are now no longer going to be on a college hardwood near you and in the NBA. Really quickly before we wrap up this segment, everyone's freaking out about it, and the panic has set in the land. The Pacers control Game 1 against the Cleveland Cavaliers 98-80. What will happen to the Cavaliers? Are they still going to challenge the Warriors in the finals, or does this one game portend bad things for Cleveland? What happens now, Max, to LeBron and the Cavaliers? Are they in trouble after a Game 1 loss?
If anything that we've said from the NHL segment is going to carry over, it's this. Don't judge a series by one game. Come on. How hard is it to say LeBron James is probably going to be fine? This is the reason it's a best of 7. You're first to 4, not first to 1. The Pacers, I'm thrilled that they won Game 1. Why? It changes the conversation. No longer is it a coronation ceremony for James and company. This is not going to be a cakewalk through the playoffs anymore. Thank goodness. The last few playoffs, until it got to the finals, snooze fest, boring. Hit the button, let me sleep through, let me get to the finals, then I'll pay attention. Now there's some intrigue, and I'm happy there's intrigue.
This is true. I mean, that's the one thing I take away from it. Now you have intrigue, you have conflict, you have drama, all the things that make sports great. Because let's be honest, you and I, more NHL kind of purists, the NBA, we're getting back into it. I think the NBA is a better product than it was a few years ago. But you need to have the smaller markets win a couple of games. That adds sauce. That adds spice. That makes it interesting. You're listening to the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network, keeping you warm here on a chilly Wednesday. They've rolled the tarp over the field, but we are still here jabbering away up in the nosebleeds. Jeffrey Chiles, Max Wolpoff, and we move to our final segment. You know it. You love it. The weird and wild stories on a Wednesday. Max, I've got one for you this morning, one that might test your patience for youth sports and what happens in sports. A local football team, a soccer team, over in the UK, over in England, they are still smiling and they are still standing after a 40-0 demolition in a youth soccer match. RNAS Coldros, the women's team, the young girls, they were only able to field 8 players, and they were on the very wrong side of this defeat as they lost unprecedented 40-0 to local rival Helston in the Pirate FM Cornwall League. They've had injuries all season. In 11 games, they've given up 177 goals for a soccer team, with their only one win coming in a walkover game earlier in the year. But their manager, Charlotte Bond, who had to play herself, said that they were all smiling at the end of the final score, and a credit to the other team. That is quite the positive attitude to have, and that is I don't know if you want to say misguided attitude, but staying as a sportsman or a sportswoman despite losing 40-0 takes a lot of patience.
I have a funny feeling that line is a very hollow line. Maybe this is just a feeling I have, but
that might be their fewest goals allowed this season. I don't look at their schedule, but you have to. I think you're right. You have to feel that might be on the lower end for them this year, only fielding 7-8 players.
That's pretty bad. And at that point, the league as a whole, man, that's just not fair. It isn't fair to have to go through a game when you're expected to have 11 and you can only put on 8. That's just not right.
It's not right, but
that's awful.
It's the reality of sports, and more of a wild than a weird story on this Wednesday. What do you got for us as we look for the strangest stories in sports?
I got an interesting one from the BBC. So this involves a Olympic silver medalist rower named Zoe Toledo of the United Kingdom. So she was going about her time as a medical student, and she signed up for a research project that would have earned her a little bit of pocket money in £60. And part of the medical exam was to have an MRI scan done. And the MRI scan came back, and she had a brain tumor.
So my God.
So the last couple months she's gone through treatment, and now the tumor is gone. She's just happy that it was finally able to be done, because in the next coming weeks she's going to be rowing a charity event, but she had to have over 20 staples in the back of her head to sew the gash after they got the tumor out. And good thing, too. It's just a good thing that she actually was able to catch it, but the only reason she caught it was because she signed up for a research project that was going to give her £60 in cash, and it just gave her life back.
Amazing. That's more inspiring and incredible than weird or wild. Just crazy.
I think it's a little wild to, hey, I'm just going to sign up and get some pocket money, and then they call you back. You need to come back and take a look at this.
I mean, right? I mean, so what was it? She was a rower on her, what was it, a college team?
No, she was a rower for the national team. She won an Olympic silver in Rio.
And then, so all she was doing was to make a little extra cash. I've been there. I've been looking for extra cash and did a few studies for money at the University of Michigan when I was there. But, yeah, she was simply going in to participate in the study and make some extra money. And, oh, by the way, you're leaving with a brain tumor. But thank God. I mean, God bless her that they were able to find that and take care of it. And hopefully it's in remission.
It's thankfully goodness. It was nearly too late, but she was taken into procedure. It was supposed to take 4 hours, but it was a 13-hour surgery, and she was finally able to be wheeled out. And thank goodness, too, she was able to get her life back, thanks to basically a 60-pound medical assessment.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. A great way and an inspiring story to wrap up our edition of the Cheap Seats on this Wednesday morning. We want to thank you for listening. Thanks to Christian Heimel back in the studio for all of his hard work, making sure we go on the air. Before you go, please go to our Facebook page, Cheap Seats Sports Podcast, and vote on our poll question. Should the Major League Baseball, I always give this the definitive article for some reason, should Major League Baseball shorten their season with this cold weather? We've had 24 games postponed. The record is, I believe, 26 back in 2007. What do you think? Should Major League Baseball shorten their season and make it more palatable for fans, players, and the media? Go vote on that right now. Before you do that, you want to represent the Cheap Seats? You want to be like Max and I with our nachos and our beer and probably our hot chocolate today up there representing the Cheap Seats on Public House Media? Do us a favor. Go to the store at phmedia.com. Get yourself some Cheap Seats swag and wear what the pros wear. That's right. You can get a mug, shirt, probably a flag you can hang out outside your house. You can get hopefully you can get a Cheap Seats you can get a Cheap Seats. What are the footsie pajamas? You can get some of those. What are those called? Right? What are those?
Onesies.
Onesies. Get a Cheap Seats onesie. We gotta have a onesie in the store. Go do that. Support us. Support the show. That's gonna do it for this Wednesday. Thanks to Christian Heimel. Thanks to Baxter Colburn. Max Wolpoff with his Washington rant that will live in my heart forever. I'm Geoff Chiles saying so long to our Cheap Seats fans. You can find us here every Wednesday on the Public House Media Network.